society with love, compassion, and justice. In this congregation, we have faith in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, are part of the interdependent web of existence, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. Everyone is welcome here, regardless of their politics, criminal records, religious proclivities, gender identities, who they love, or if they are unsure of any or all of the above categories. You are human, and we are glad you are here today.
We light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion, to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which unites and sustains us.
Wind, water, fire, earth. Wind, your baleful breath has stoked wildfires and razed dwellings. In times to come, waft your lovely voice over the backs of mother sea turtles. Bless the laying of their eggs. Stir sands of memory to send hatchlings scampering to the sea. Bring rain, brimming, brimming. Water, your tsunamis have swallowed villages. Your heated, acidic oceans choked with plastic have drowned polar bears and whitened coral reefs. Even so, your rolling waves are mother to us all. May your staggering seas wash away human callousness. We have unbalanced nature and murdered countless species. Despair stalks our shores. In times to come, trickle agape into briny tide pools. Gestate new life forms, friends for earth. Fire, you have devoured with unbridled appetite all that wind sets in your fierce path. The bluebird cries over her young. The worst of it, hope, buried under surging sands. In times to come, devour viruses that feed on lungs. Let them know destruction. Earth, you have turned against your people, who have depleted your once fecund ground and poisoned the blood in your veins, cracking fissures in search of fuels. You quake with rage. Earth, in times to come, shelter the rabbit in her burrow, ease her birth pangs, lick mucus from the kids' noses, and teach them where to find scrumptious dandelion leaves. They'll come along, won't they? Dandelions to the new world.
Years ago in my old rural town, I and my husband came across this very large common snapping turtle in the middle of the road. We moved it out of danger on our way, marveling at its presence. We were impressed forever. In fact, we still talk about that turtle today. It was at least 4 feet across. Okay, next. Speaking of animals, scientists have found out animals are more conscious and are sentient beings in multiple studies. We know that elephants send high-frequency rumbles and that whales sing. In 2012, a scientist signed paper called the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness said that mammals, birds, and octopus are conscious in the same way that humans are. David Quinn, in his book Ishmael, talks about the human disconnection with the universe and animals in it. The human disconnection from the web of life has put humanity in more peril, especially today as we deal with this pandemic caused by zoonotic virus. Okay, next. I have been exploring science with a new interest in fossils, epochs of time, and the extinctions. It is surmised today that we are in the sixth extinction that is fueled by mankind. Multiple species and diversity are disappearing. The epochs of life show how complex life is. Too many people think we just had the dinosaurs, that the asteroid appeared, and then man suddenly popped up. Okay. The story is far more complex on a 4.5 billion year old Earth. We had microbes in the oceans for 2.3 billion years, which produced oxygen for life to exist in the first place through the Great Oxidation Event. Life was limited to the ocean around 500 million years ago during the Cambrian explosion of life that most animal life is descended from. There actually wasn't any life on land at all. The chordates arrived at that point, which were the first vertebrates, animals with backbones, and humans are descended from them. Our origins are from the ocean and time itself. Next. If our physical blocks of our skeletal structure rest with the animals, why not our consciousness? The oceans of time that seem to stretch into eternity have brought endless varieties of plant and animal life. Life itself seems to hold a consciousness of its own waxing and waning. Humans arrived at a very human-centric view of themselves and of their place in their universe. A biological narcissism, as it were. It is in our Abrahamic and other dominant religions when humankind decided they were the peak of all creation and decided to dominate nature. They separated themselves from the oneness of being, the web of life, and the expansiveness of time. Erased was the consciousness of nature, the earth, and animal life. Next. David Quinn talks about the time before life became disconnected and devalued as a whole, just to be conquered or sold. Native tribes kept their connection to nature and knew they were one with it. The turtle was seen as a foundation of the earth and a symbol of the earth as a womb that all life came out of and consciousness. Next. One reason may be because turtles date back to 220 million years ago from the Triassic period. Ancient turtles were very large. Next. Stupendous is one 5 to 15 million year old turtle discovered in South America. Turtles and tortoises date back to the times of dinosaurs and are distant relatives. These huge turtles, next, seem to explain the beliefs in many cultures about the turtle carrying the earth on its shell. Compared to all this, human beings are newcomers. Modern Homo sapiens is only hundreds of thousands of years old. Our early ancestors only go back to 5 million years ago. If one looks at the oceans of time to bring us to this point, this is far more awe-inspiring than beliefs that have cut us off from ourselves and the rest of living beings and the reality of our own origins. Next. One thing to remember is to talk to the animals. If you do, they will talk back to you. Then you won't understand, and when you don't understand, you will fear, and when you fear, you will destroy the animals, and if you destroy the animals, you will destroy yourself. Chief Dan George. Next. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw, for I was seeing in a sacred manner the shape of all things, as they all must live together like one being. Black Elk.
Thank you, Lisa. Very nice. Jim Fuller, our newly retired person, will share his thoughts with us.
So how does nature affect the way you think? I am a lifelong UU, so I feel compelled to begin with the transcendentalists of the early 19th century, Ralph Waldo Emerson being the central figure amongst them. They saw spirituality in nature, and nature is a divinity. And they felt that eternity, infinity, death, and God were incomprehensible. They were sublime. And that nature was a path to the sublime. I've been in many settings observing the splendor of nature, and I take nature to mean the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. I also think of nature as that which has not been spoiled by human activity. So when I view a splendid vista from a mountaintop, or marvel at the view of from the Grand Canyon rim, or gaze into an immense, dark, star-filled sky, I feel overwhelming emotion. I sense that it's incomprehensible, that it's sublime. But as I've gotten older, these feelings have actually faded. Instead of incomprehensible, the wonder is displaced by curiosity. And curiosity leads me to research. And the research gives me knowledge. And as I get a greater appreciation from this knowledge of a few simple building blocks have come together in so many complex and wonderful ways. Emerson and Thoreau were observers of nature. Walden Pond is not the Sierra Nevada mountains, and Emerson was not John Muir. John Muir immersed himself in an untamed world. He would hike the mountains for weeks at a time with just a bedroll. He actually lived a life that Emerson only wrote about. So then Muir fought to keep the wild in wilderness. Now Muir read Emerson, and he liked Emerson and met Emerson, and like Emerson, he saw God in nature. Myself, Jim Fuller, like Muir, I like to immerse myself deeply into the natural world. I am at my best and my most mindful when I'm knee-deep in black, gooey river bottom mud. I grab at a felled tree that's blocking my path downstream. And I drag my canoe with one hand over the tree that is commonly covered with raccoon feces. When I go on these long, dirty, sometimes multi-day canoe trips, where was I? I go on long trips, and I feel wonder at the marvels I see. And my wonder and my curiosity and my scientific needs are fueled by experiencing nature in such intense ways. On these long, dirty canoe trips, you see flora and fauna that are not found on the graded paths in the local park. I enjoy quietly paddling up to an animal and getting the stunned look. "What are you doing here?" it says to me. So how does all this affect my consciousness? Certainly it feeds my mind, my curiosity, and my emotion to feel part of the interconnected web. But where I differ from the transcendentalists is I don't need a supernatural director to insert in the middle of it. Emerson did not know about redshift caused by an expanding universe, and he never saw a star factory nebula in a Hubble Space Telescope photograph. He didn't know about DNA. He didn't know about the 4 fundamental forces of nature. So I marvel at this incredible universe, but I just don't need to explain it as incomprehensible.
Thank you, Jim. Very lovely. So the title of my sermon today is Turtle Stories. Chang Tu is a name that is unfamiliar to many of you. He lived about 2,400 years ago in China. He is to the great Lao Tzu as St. Paul was to Jesus. In other words, he had a hand in making the Taoist philosophy into a world-class religion. One day, while Chang Tu was sitting quietly alongside the River Po with a fishing pole in his hand, two emissaries from the court of the emperor came to him. They bowed politely and offered Chang Tu, who did not turn away from his fishing, they informed Chang Tu, who did not turn away from his fishing, that the emperor had requested that he, because of his great wisdom, travel to the emperor's court where he would be installed as the emperor's high advisor. Chang Tu, still without turning away from the river and his fishing, asked, "Is it not true that within the royal palace is a finely carved teak box that is entrusted with many precious jewels?" The man answered, "Yes." Chang Tu continued, "Is it also true that within the teak box is the shell of a turtle that is over 3,000 years old, which is used to predict the future?" Again, the man answered, "Yes." Without taking his eyes off the river, Chang Tu asked, "Now, would that turtle rather be honored in that box and dead, or would he rather be alive dragging his tail through the mud?" The emperor's men quietly left. Incidentally, I have to thank Jim for that image of dragging his tail through the mud in that earlier presentation. We did not plan this. Earlier this week, a friend whose insights and intuitions I trust very much sent me an email suggesting that I might have stepped out of bounds last Sunday. She thought that by using the Muppet rendition of Harry Belafonte's Earth Song, that I was guilty of cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is basically stealing another culture for one's own purposes. Lisa, please play the Earth Song for us so that we can jog our memories. Let's play the whole thing. It's a great song.
We come from the fire. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around.
We come from the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, oh, so is life.
Ah, so is life.
Whoa, oh, so is life.
Ah, so is life.
Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am?
Who I am.
See we one another clearly. Do we know
who you are?
Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Water make the river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Only can the spirit turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Only can the spirit turn the world around. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are?
Do you know who I am?
Do I know who we are?
See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are?
Do you know who I am?
See we one another clearly.
Do we know who we are?
Oh, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is life. Whoa, so is life, but you are. So is.
Thank you, Lisa. I hope you guys enjoyed that for the second time. It's a great song. And it fits so well, again, with what we're trying to do today. Now, to be perfectly clear, I was guilty as charged. I was guilty of cultural appropriation. Further, I knew I was guilty while I was doing it. In one of the Gnostic Gospels, Jesus says to a man working in the fields on the Sabbath, "Man, if you know what you are doing, you are blessed. If you do not know what you're doing, you are cursed and a transgressor of the law." So let's hope that I know what I'm doing. In my response to my friend's email, I said in another email, as far as cultural appropriation goes, I believe I have a license to do that. For instance, in this week's sermon, I'm going to use some of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is one of the founding people of our religion. He was influenced by Immanuel Kant and Hindu metaphysics. The big problem with being a consciousness-bearing species is that we can so easily become estranged from ourselves and our true nature, or if you please, just nature with a capital N. This estrangement, as you can see with even a casual look at yourself and the world around you, creates a giant mess, a lot of misery, and a huge body count. Every society from the ancient Babylonians to the Navajo have attempted to address the problem of estrangement. It is a very serious and universal problem, and I will take whatever help I can get in addressing it. Now, still in the email, interestingly, the song last week directly addressed the problem of estrangement. There was a lot of stolen culture in that song. Belafonte, an American-born artist, used the Caribbean beat and lyrics derived from bits of mythology from pre-colonial Guinea in Western Africa. The sermon I will preach next Sunday is also full of stolen culture. The Zeus story is probably a derivative from India, are the indigenous people of America, and the main story of my sermon is stolen from Taoism, the one you guys just heard about Chang Tu. Anyway, I appreciate your attempts to keep me honest. I hope you will keep reminding me of these kinds of things. I need to know, even if I choose to continue being a thief. End of email. And thank you very much to my good friend who sent me that email. The theme of this service is humanity, nature, and consciousness. The goal of our humanist religion is to evolve towards greater consciousness and compassionate living. The theory of our religion is that if we are going to have compassionate, joyous lives that are worth living, that we must seek wholeness. This is where the rub comes in. We are consciousness-bearing beings who are not only a part of nature, again with a capital N, but we also create symbolic selves. We are so good at creating symbolic selves that we easily become estranged from our nature selves. Let's look at poor Yertle. Yertle's symbolic self, his ego, compelled him to be the king of all he could see. This is the problem with ego. It is all about keeping score. Ego really never has enough. It always wants more approval, more fame, more money, a bigger TV. Houses on 2 continents are the most accomplished, acclaimed rather, hot dish at the church potluck. More, 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 more. The problem is you can never get enough of what you didn't really want in the first place. The ego, because it is symbolic, will never have enough. Only your true nature knows when enough is enough. Nature knows that when your tail is in the mud, that you are most successful at being a human being. Yertle's ego wanted him to sit precariously and probably uncomfortably on top of his Yertle throne so that he could see just a little further and pretend that he was a big deal. Yertle did not realize that life is much more satisfying and sustaining when one's tail has a bit of mud on it. The same message with which Chang Tu gifted the Emperor's Men and with which Jim Fuller gifted us today. For instance, your symbolic self, your ego, may want a fancy 4-wheel drive pickup even though a Prius would serve you and your needs better. On the other hand, your nature rather likes polar bears and wants them to have plenty of ice and seals. Your ego may want you to be the world's best mom, so you run yourself ragged, scheduling numerous enriching activities for your kids and driving them to and from numerous events, all the while holding down a full-time job so that your family can live in a big house in a good school district. Maybe nature wants you to just take some time with your kids, hold them and teach them to gather the nourishing manna that will sustain them in their life's journey. Your ego may want you to make a lot of money, so you dedicate your life to finance, become the CEO of a great corporation. You make in 1 hour what the average person in America makes in a whole year. Maybe nature didn't want that for you at all. Maybe it installed in you a love of trees and wanted you to use your life to plant a forest. The ego is, as I said, always about keeping score. It constantly compares you and your accomplishments to others. Nature, on the other hand, presents in the psyche as love of the soil, love of the night sky, love of your children, all children, love of the forest, love of the ponds, oceans, and deserts, love of your community and of your place, love of all people, even the most grumpy, disagreeable ones. Darwin loved beetles, which ultimately led to his groundbreaking ideas. Gretchen Ullman loves music, which gives her soul expression. Nan Lundeen loves poetry. It bubbles up in her. Harvey Johnson loves the natural world, which he communes with in a ravine behind his backyard. Clark Gilpin loves theology and has written a history of the role of Protestant theologians in theological schools in America. Candace Onwiller loves the piano and has taught hundreds to play. I love the great mystery of it all, how it smacks me in the face with wonder, expands my heart, sometimes causes me to laugh out loud, and enfolds me with love. I could go on and on. I could go on and on about this whole congregation. Needless to say, this is a congregation of lovers. The trick is learning to listen to what you love. It is the voice of nature calling to you. By way of footnote, nature, grounded being, the Tao, and God are different ways of saying the same thing, which is, of course, not a thing at all and can't really be said at all. It can only be pointed towards. What you love is your connection to God. If your love is machine design, you should follow. If your love is frogs, you must follow. If your love is digital calculus, you must follow. If your love is studying the traditions of indigenous peoples, you must follow. If your love is the theater, you must follow. Let's go back to the ego, the symbolic self. I do not want to give it short shrift. We need strong egos to withstand the battering of life. We need strong egos to make sure we get to work on time and see that the kids have the right school supplies, and to occasionally keep us from running, screaming, and naked into the streets. The ego is, as I have hoped to demonstrate, not enough. You must never let the ego forget that it is a servant, not the master. Spirituality is, in a sense, about cutting a deal between nature and ego. The deal looks like this. Ego, you are needed to perform certain management functions. Unfortunately, it is way too easy for you to get out of hand and make decisions and pursue goals that are counterproductive or even destructive to life. So for some time every day, you are going to place yourself in eclipse to nature and let your tail drag in the mud a bit. During those times, you will listen intently to the mud, which is your true life, your true nature, your true love. In this way, you will know what love requires. All the above is not new. It is in fact ancient. The word for being in nature is in Sanskrit ananda, which means resting within. I suspect it is also what Jesus meant when he referenced the kingdom of heaven. There's a teaching from the Tao. A man goes into a butcher shop and asks the butcher for his best piece of meat. The butcher says every piece is best. This teaching has nothing to do with butchers, our meat, and everything to do with Ananda. So the bottom line of this sermon is, take some time every day to do what you love. Sometimes love will whisper gently in your ear that this strange, complex, magnificent thing we call life is a disguise for the infinite. Other times it will grab you by the lapels and shake some sense into you. At those times when you lose the courage to love and try to hide, love will stalk you like a hunter. Still other times love will shove you out into the streets in support of justice. And much of the time love is a balm, because in life there is suffering. So let your tail drag in the mud. Come back to the mountain, the water, the fire, and the spirit. Dare to love what you love. It is the only pathway to your greatest, truest life. And let us now observe a moment of silence, just 1 minute, and we'll let Lisa start our hymn when she is ready.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are.
Times of pandemic, domestic unrest, and political divisiveness, let this chalice serve as a beacon of hope and peace in a troubled world. Carry this light with you throughout the week as a promise of a better day ahead. Oh, and by the way, the turtles are hatching on Venice Beach.
Wow. Thank you, Dennis and Ellen. Thank you all for coming.